Welcome to our webinar titled Database Monitoring, the First and Last Line of Defense. We will get started at 3 past the hour. Thank you for joining us. And again, we will get started at 3 past the hour. Welcome, and thank you for joining us for our webinar titled Database Monitoring, the First and Last Line of Defense. Today's program will cover how to improve your security profile and protect against data breaches. Hi, I'm your host, Jennifer Hahn, and before we begin, I want to go over a few housekeeping items. At the bottom of your audience console, you'll find multiple application widgets you can use. Should you have any questions, please submit it using the Q&A widget. The widget is located at the bottom of your console to the right of your screen. We will try to answer all questions during the session, but should we run out of time, we will answer them via email. Additional webinars material that you might be interested are located in the resource list widget that looks like a green folder at the bottom of your console and to the right of your screen. If you have any technical difficulties, please click on the Help widget with the question mark icon. An on-demand version of the webcast will be available approximately 1 day after the webcast and can be accessed using the same audience link that was sent to you earlier. Also, you will receive an email from Imperva with a link to the recording and the slides. Since time is of the essence, let's welcome today's speaker, Cheryl O'Neill.
Good morning. Thank you, everyone. My name is Cheryl O'Neill, and I'm a 15-year veteran of this industry, working with life sciences, Fortune 500 companies to safeguard their information and make sure they stay compliant. At the present, I'm managing the Securesphere data solution portfolio for Imperva, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to today's session. As Jennifer mentioned, today we're talking about database monitoring and why it is your first and last line of defense. As we go through today's presentation, you will see a couple of polls pop up. They should be pop-up windows, and you should be able to answer them at your leisure. And if I set them up properly, you should be able to see the results immediately. If not, the results will be available at the end of the presentation in a slide. They will be captured in the recording so that if you need to view this offline later, you'll be able to see those results there as well. And with that, I'd like to jump in. And remember, you can enter questions at any time during the presentations, and we will get to them at the end. So the first question is, why should you protect your audit and critical data? Or why should you protect and audit your critical data? Well, it's pretty straightforward. You're going to have business, social, and personal consequences. Data breaches are getting more expensive. And of course, I've got a phone call. I apologize for that. More regulations, more costly penalties. Your personal employee data is at risk. We've all seen what happened earlier in this year with some of the breaches, and we understand why the personal information is at such risk and what the consequences. We've seen suicides and other very drastic things happen, people losing their jobs, $25 million fines. On the compliance front, the Dutch just rolled out some additional compliance regulations this week. The EU is going to do it before the end of the year. And 22 states have passed stiffer or updated laws this year. And all of that is adding to your burden. Trying to do this manually is not going to be something that you want to do in your day-to-day life. So I'm here to ask you, what are you trying to improve? Are you trying to improve your compliance readiness? Are you trying to improve your security measures? Or are you going to take a best practice approach and try to improve both simultaneously? And that's what we're going to discuss today. So the challenge is protecting your data at the source. Your perimeter is being breached. Every day, somebody is getting breached. Whether you know it or not, your endpoints are vulnerable. They're getting compromised. Internal users are a risk. They're compromised, they're careless, and they're malicious. I was sitting on the BART train going to a security conference earlier this year, and there was a young woman sitting next to me, obviously a lawyer, said so on her bag, really nice bag that had the firm's name on the side. And I glanced down and I could see she was working on a brief. Big yellow Post-it note on her laptop screen, password. So now I can see this young woman's name, I know the firm she works at, and now I know her password. She is a compromised user, whether she knows it or not. She's not intending to do anything bad, but that's the example of your careless user. And that's rampant in this industry where we have so many passwords that we just can't remember. And so people are writing them down and sticking them in places where they can be picked up and used. They're keeping them in text files on their computers that can be easily read. Then there's the privileged user. These are accounts that are data wells waiting to be tapped. If you can compromise some of these system accounts or these privileged users, you can walk through the databases with impunity. There's nothing to stop you except for a data monitoring solution that can protect the data at the source. It's not enough just to protect one, your Oracle database or your SQL Server database. You have to protect the full spectrum of your data ecosystem. If you've got it in MySQL, if you've got it in a big data instance, or if you've got it in other analytics, data warehousing, you need to protect it across the spectrum. There are many, many companies out there. We see this all the time where their production systems are locked down and tight as a drum. But there's a server sitting in a closet that somebody forgot to shut off, and it's still pinging away, and it's got your old employee records on it. It's got your health insurance information. All that information is just as valuable as the customer names and information. It gets sold on the net, on the dark net. It gets aggregated, laundered just like money, and then sold back to legitimate businesses for nefarious purposes. So as we look at the compliance process, if your challenge is simplifying it, that means you're probably dealing with a lot of regulations. You probably don't have the in-house IT expertise to know how they all interrelate and how they're supposed to work together. So you need a way to simplify that and create a best practices for your company. You need to boil it down to a few things that you can do routinely and demonstrate on a continuous basis that you're doing well and proper. it's going to boil down to, are you assessing your risk properly? Are you monitoring and auditing what you need to? Are you paying attention to user rights and managing them effectively? And are you protecting that data either from, for privacy reasons or security reasons? And then, of course, you have to have the task and policy-specific reporting. If you do all of the logging in the world, and you do a fantastic job of it, but you cannot produce a SOC-specific report, the auditor's still going to fail you. You need to have those task and policy-specific reporting capabilities within your solution. And it's essential that you recognize that data is a company asset and protecting data is a company-wide necessity. Traditionally, we would go in and talk to companies about compliance, and we might be talking to the risk and audit team. The DBAs, you might get involved and say, no way, we don't want this. It's going to slow down our systems. And IT might have to come in and say, we're going to do it anyway. But security wasn't part of that conversation. Over the last 9 months since we've seen the Sony breach, the Anthem breach, the Office of Personnel Management, we've seen that shift. We've seen security come to the table and say, this can help us. And by bringing these teams together and recognizing the common goal of that data is an essential asset that must be protected, you can pool and eliminate the silos that occur in both the solutions and the efforts. So you can eliminate the overlap and you can work out the processes so that you're all working together towards a common goal. Of course, this helps gain more budget and more buy-in for your tools and your solutions. You may not have to do all of the work within your own department. Now you may get some help outside of your own team. And as we know, this is always great from a team perspective, having more people work on the problem and work on it faster. So let's take a look at what the difference is between an audit policy and a database security policy. This is some first time some of these teams are coming together, and they need to understand the differences and what they're coming to the table looking for. The database audit team and compliance team is looking for a record that they can use in a future review. The auditor's going to come in and want to see this information. It has to be a broad scope, pan-enterprise. Is it being are the policies being effectively applied pan-enterprise on all sensitive data, across all data incidences, across all users? Is it consistent? It does not invoke action when the activity occurs. So an auditor doesn't, necessarily care that following a data breach that you took, that the action was immediate. It's did you remediate the problem? And it's a legal record of the events. So it's a visibility into what's going on and into your processes. Security, on the other hand, is very, very different. This is where we want to stop bad things from happening. We're going to need to alert in real time on suspicious behavior. We're going to need to block in real time against obvious bad behavior. This is action-orientated solution. And together, you can see that if I'm monitoring the information, I can take action. And so the database security leverages what we're doing on the audit front to deliver on the action front. So while these are two separate channels, they have overlapping objectives and overlapping requirements. So let's take a look at this from a tools versus solution perspective. We all go out to our garage and grab a tool. We use it to perform a set of specific tasks. Solutions solve a bigger problem. They solve our business problem. So if we're looking at this problem from a tools versus solution perspective, native audit is going to be a logging tool. It doesn't provide any security or policy-specific capabilities. If you want to use native audit because you think it's free, you're going to have to recognize that it does not have any built-in security or policy-specific capabilities. You're going to have to wrap that tool and the scripts and the manual processes to achieve the business objective and solve the business's problem. Alternatively, you can look at a solution such as Securesphere, which is a data protection and audit solution. It's going to improve your database security, and it's going to simplify your compliance. Let's take a look at how that works in more detail. First, let's see how many of you actually have tools. If you don't have anything at all, if you're using a native tool or some other type of script and other tool systems, or if you have an existing solution that you're interested in replacing. I'm assuming that if you have a solution that you love, you wouldn't be on this call. All right, let's look at the things you want to consider when you're going into, evaluate and consider purchasing a database monitoring solution. You're going to need to look at the enterprise design and deployment efficiency, as well as the audit, security, and compliance functionality. On the enterprise front, look at the architecture. Efficiency. What is the scale of appliances to databases? How many appliances, collector appliances is what they're typically called, or gateways, is it going to take to monitor all of your servers? If you've got 50 servers, you're going to require so much hardware. If you've got 5,000 servers, you're going to require a much larger footprint. Do you want to use physical hardware, or do you want to use VMs? Look at how the agents are actually going to be monitoring the content. There's multiple ways to monitor the activity that's going on in the database. You can sit on the network channel and watch it out of band, or you can be in band and watch it as it actually runs through the pipe, or you can be deployed within the actual database server itself. This is the same type of place where the native audit would work, but these are two very, very different architectural designs and approaches. If you were to turn on native audit within Oracle, you would see a 20% hit in the statistics that matter. If you were to turn on Securesphere, the Securesphere solution, you would see a substantially lower hit than that, significantly lower. We're talking, 5 to 10% here. Lower in some situations, depending on how much you've turned on and how much you've turned off, and that's configurable. But that 5 is kind of the bump in the top here. Do you need a hybrid? Most companies are going to deploy a hybrid solutions. They need to monitor the privileged user. So the privileged user can walk into the server room, sit down at the database, and start working on it. He can slip in a thumb drive and start working. You need to have that local agent in many places. Other places, it may be sufficient to monitor the pipe or the network and capture the information and traffic there. You need to sit down with an architect and your team and decide what ratio of on-database and network is going to work best for you. Then you need to look at, if you're a larger organization, you may want to, or you have critical information that is absolutely critical. You're in the financial services industry or some other highly regulated industry where you cannot have gaps in your audit trail and you have high transaction databases. You may want to look at high availability or clustering options. What options are available, and what's it going to mean to your deployment? If the monitoring efficiency is low and you then add clustering and high availability, then that poor solution that has the poor gateway to server ratio is going to multiply. It's going to go exponentially larger, and so now you're talking more hardware, more VMs, more overhead costs, more maintenance costs. So this is where looking at that efficiency is key to understanding what you're going to do from a solution perspective. Your deployment, updates, and maintenance. This is a key factor. We all have been in enterprises that bought software and the solution was just never rolled out successfully. You need to look at the deployment, the updates, and the ongoing maintenance. What comes out of the box? If you buy a solution and it doesn't come with out-of-the-box compliance-specific policies, who in your organization can write those? Do they have the expertise to know if SOX or HIPAA takes precedent, or if there is a difference? How do you write those rules to go through and evaluate what needs to be monitored. That content out of the box eliminates much of the expertise requirements you have inside. And of course, most of us don't have that type of expertise in-house, so we would have to go hire an SI firm to bring that expertise in to build those things for us. That's an additional expense on that solution. Now, what happens a year from now when the vendor updates the solution and changes something in the reporting methodology? You now have to bring those experts back in, and they have to rewrite those reports. So that maintenance cost, continues to go up and your ROI goes down. What other content comes out of the box? So we've got the policies, we've got the reports. Are there workflows? What's automated? Does it come with user rights management, verification processes? Now, these are all little things that over time can make or break a solution if you have to fix them every time an update comes out. So by coming out of the box, all those updates and all that QA is done by the vendor ahead of time. What does it take to deploy your agents? If you choose an agent deployment model and you have 10 databases, your deployments can be straightforward. If you have 1,500 databases and you need to deploy an update to one of those agents because you've changed a policy requirement, how are you going to get to all 1,500 databases in a timely manner and apply that change so it's uniformly applied and you can track that through your audit logs and your compliance logs and enforce it? You need to have an API, an automated deployment that can make that happen. It has to be straightforward and simple because if you have to manually go touch 1,500 databases, you're probably not going to do it. Then look at the upgrade backward and forward capabilities of your solution. Again, if you're small, your updates are probably pretty straightforward. You get over 50 databases, 100 databases, and now you're looking at, okay, I have to upgrade the components in this solution. I've got clustering or high availability. Okay, I got more components. If that vendor rolls out an update, some solution vendors recommend that you do it all at once. So let's think about this. I've got my management servers because most of these solutions are a 3-tier architecture. I've got my collector gateway and I've got my agents. Can I update 100 agents, 20 gateways, 2 management servers over a weekend and test it? Probably not. So that means you need some level of upgrade backward and forward capability across each segment of the architecture. It's not sufficient that your reporting tool be backwardly compatible with your gateway, because if your agent isn't talking to your new gateway, it doesn't matter because there's going to be nothing to report on. So you have to have that backward and forward capability across each level of the architecture. And that's critical as you move into a more maintenance mode. Task and system visibility. I touched on this earlier. You need policy-specific reports. It's time to, look at your user rights management. Go to the section and pull the user rights management reports. You don't want to build those. That's not part of what you're good at. That's not your job. Go into the solution and pull those reports. They're pre-configured and they're set up to meet the requirements. Utilize a centralized management tool. Look at the health of the system. Look at what's going on in the system. Spot new databases, all from that centralized location. This is different than a SIM. A SIM, don't confuse this with a SIM. This is looking at your database protection from a centralized management, keeping track of what databases have been found, which databases are protected, which ones are at risk through a graphical set of displays. That's not something your SIM is meant to do. Then look for your role-based functions and reports. So you may be the guy that's responsible for doing X. You don't want to have to, adopt or build something specific. You want to be able to go in and with as few clicks as possible get your job done. And you need to be able to walk into that solution and hit the road and get your job done. So look for a solution that doesn't mean at the top of the menu it's going to say, Bob's job. It means that as you go through each one of the things that your job consists of, you can get them done efficiently. So don't confuse your UI with the actual execution of your tasks. All right. On the audit and security and compliance functionality side, look at your database identification prioritization. This is where it starts. You have to understand where your data lives and exists and what information is inside of those databases. You have to have an effective discovery mechanism. If you were to try to do this manually, you probably couldn't in a large organization. You're just not going to have that level of visibility. Ooh, somebody threw up a new MySQL instance and copied some data out of one of my production systems. Crap. That data is not masked, it's not encrypted, and it's live production data, and nothing is paying attention to who's accessing that data. Classify the risk. Risk classification is critical. We used to just, say, oh, it's compliance data, let's monitor. But that's not sufficient. You've got to look outside of the box. There's the must-dos and the should-dos. Understand that more information is sensitive than what is regulated. Your Social Security number is certainly regulated. Credit cards certainly regulated. But you've got to look at a broader set of information and say, what is our risk from a business perspective? Would I push this up to a public entity, and if I did, what would be the impact of that information going public? Look at it from that perspective, and then utilize some, there's a lot of risk classification tools out there that can help with this. But out of the box, the tool is going to give you a baseline set of information and classify that information for you. And then you can take that from a business perspective and apply it across your own personal organization. User rights management, key. Separation of duties, who has access. We do this all the time. We walk into an organization, we run a simple user rights management analysis, and people are astonished at how many people, we just did this recently, and there was 3,000 people using a root account, a system admin account to get into something. Nobody was even aware of it because all of these people had their own ID, but somehow they all got set up and they were all accessing the system with essentially the admin ID. So, that's the type of thing. They thought they were doing a good job, but when we actually analyzed it, it wasn't true. Monitoring intelligence. This is critical. If your monitoring capabilities are bad and your tool you use to write those policies is not effective, then all your downstream activity is going to be built off of that, and you're going to have these problems execute. You need a map policy tool that will let you write policies independent of each other. If you think of this from a technology standpoint, we used to write BASIC, and other types of code, which was a monolithic code base. We started at line 1. You can think of it as your math operations. And you went from line to line to line to line to line, and everything had to be proper. And if you got one paren out of place or one comma out of place, it didn't work. There are solutions out there that their policy management tools require that level of detail in writing their policies. Each policy is not independent, so you need to have an independent policy management system that lets you build those rules that are independent and will execute. To think about it, if you had to write one policy that included all the rules and one monolithic, could you do it? Could you maintain it over time? Data enrichment. What level of data enrichment is available in your solution? And I'll touch on this a little bit more in a bit. And then uniform policy enforcement. What is the mechanism for applying these policies uniformly across your PAN enterprise? And finally, your security interlock. You have to have user tracking and dynamic profiling. If you've got a user that comes in through the web, can you track them down to the database level, or do they get lost at the system account level? Threat correlation. Are you getting information from your other tools in your ecosystem? Are your alerts going to both your local database and your SIM if you're using one? And do you want to adopt quarantining and blocking? If so, What is the speed of that evaluation and blocking, and what's the flexibility? Can you block it? Can you quarantine it? How fast is that evaluation? What's it going to do to, the flow of business? All things to consider. Securesphere capabilities. So let's talk about Securesphere now. Securesphere is going to inspect more and process less. What do I mean by that? Well, Securesphere has independent high-performance monitoring channels. So what that means is I can inspect all activity or a large amount of activity for security purposes while actually auditing or logging only the data needed for compliance purposes. There's many activities that go on in your databases that could be security risks but are not subject to the audit requirements. Now remember, this goes back to what's audit versus what's security. And so having that two-channel and that independent channel lets your security team do one set of things while your audit team addresses another set of teams. Again, back to function. What are our objectives, and is our solution helping us achieve those objectives? Exchanging correlated information. Securesphere will help you ID and track users. It'll add context and verify information. It works with WAF, ticketing systems, LDAP, FireEye, SIM, Splunk, and other SQL-type lookup solutions. Custom. You can write a table for this type of stuff, or you can integrate to other solutions. Spot and stop suspicious activity. Dynamic profiling. It learns over time, and you can fine-tune it without the need to create policies. So if you have a solution that does dynamic profiling, but you need to tune it so it doesn't throw off a lot of false positives through a policy mechanism, that's going to get out of date very, very quickly. You need something that can be fine-tuned without the need to create those policies. And then alert, quarantine, and block. We've mentioned this before, but Securesphere has an extremely robust and flexible model. Securesphere Compliance capability. In essence, it finds, classifies, monitors, audits, enforces, and reports. That's compliance in a nutshell. When you dig into it, it's going to help you discover rogue databases. It's going to enrich your data. It's going to do privileged user monitoring. It's going to help you investigate and analyze. It solves the business problem. It helps you address that need. So we've talked about Securesphere leveraging your other investments. So let's look at some of these. It's going to help you limit your risk through our FireEye integration. It automatically monitors all of the activity and will, if FireEye detects there's a compromised host, it can trigger automatically a monitoring of all of that user's activity without necessarily cutting off that account. Or it can restrict the data access of that compromised host. So if you think about this as you've got, an executive or somebody traveling, and, if you just shut off their account, that may be overkill. What you want to do is you want to pay attention to everything that user is doing, and when something bad happens or starts to happen, then limit or restrict access of that user account. But if nothing bad happens, then let them continue to do their job. Improve the visibility and analysis. A lot of people are adopting SIM and Splunk and other types of solutions to holistically analyze and consolidate security data and alerts. That may be something that works within your organization, or you may be comfortable with the local solution. Add contextual intelligence with LDAP and data lookups, user verification and enrichment. Enforce change management policy. So in our compliance requirements, it's very clearly stated that, who made this change, why did they make this change, and where is the ticket approving this change? It's there, and you have to log it. That ticket has to be there and identified along with the change. Automate that. Make it routine. Eliminate the manual overhead of correlating those things offline. Track users from the web application to the activity with Securesphere WAF. Correlate that activity. Understand what that user's doing. Don't let them slip through the cracks. So here's an example of what I mean by smarter policy evaluation. Here for a PCI requirement, we have a user that just ran a backup of all customer data tables at noon. Was there a change ticket for that? What was the situation? And by using the lookup capabilities, we can reach out to the ticketing system. We can correlate that there was a ticket for that, and we can associate the ticket ID with that change or that activity. For SOX, a user modified a corporate table at 3 a.m. Who's that user? What's their name? What's their role? What's their email? Should have they been doing this? With the lookup to LDAP, we can see who that user is. We can see the finance department, and using dynamic capabilities, we could say, I don't think this user should have had access to this at this particular time from somewhere in Eastern Europe, and you can stop that activity using the dynamic profiling capabilities and or policies. Here for HIPAA, we have Florence Nightingale, who assessed the governor's medical history last week. Well, Florence is a nurse. Of course she should have that access, right? Well, our governor happens to be a male, so why is a maternity nurse looking up the governor's medical history? A clear violation here that we would not be able to see if we were not able to enrich the data and see that she was a maternity nurse and had no business looking up the governor's records. Apply that same level of flexibility and lookup capability to your own organization and say, would this help me improve my data security? If the answer is yes, then you understand the difference between the native audit security tool and a solution. And you can see where the future could be here. Your fit and function. Securesphere has a rapid and flexible deployment. It requires less hardware and VMs. Has a very predictable performance at scale, out-of-the-box integrations, expertise, and content. Last week I was sitting at my desk, and this email happened to float across my desk, and I couldn't help but ask if I could use it in one of my webinars. One of our clients from a Fortune 500 financial holding company was doing an upgrade, and this is what he sent me after having done it. He likes it. I'm not sure, that's something a lot of vendors out there get to see, is that the customer likes our upgrade process. So, looking forward, you've got your problems today, but what are your problems going to be for tomorrow? Right now, only about 27% of the big data applications are in production. Of that, 83% of those are going to require some form of compliance and obviously security. At this point in time, 77% of those have no audit solution in place. They are technically out of compliance and certainly a security risk. From a cloud adoption perspective, that market is growing at an outrageous pace. This year, $46 billion will be spent on cloud databases in the cloud. 64% of the companies moving there view compliance as a barrier to the cloud. So what's going into the cloud? Is it compliance related? Are your stakeholders moving into the cloud without addressing the compliance requirements? And as of about 6 months ago, there was no off-database enterprise solutions there. At this point in time, we're on AWS, and so this is where you need to think about going. Are your solutions going to be in the cloud when you're ready to go there? So, Securesphere for big data, supporting Cloudera, Hortonworks, MongoDB, Big Insights, and soon there's several others coming out later in this month. Cloud adoption, Securesphere data protection for Amazon Web Services and other clouds in the future. So what's your action plan? When you hang up today, what are you going to go out and do to improve your own data protection? Build a plan. Know what your objectives are. Know and classify your data. Establish a risk profile. Implement a universal platform and policies. Monitor more, but audit what matters. Constantly think security and test it. Test it and test it. And then look to the future, understand what your scale is going to be, understand when you're moving to the cloud and what's going into the cloud, and understand your big data requirements and how the compliance fits in that story. All right. With that, we're right on time, and let's open up for Q&A. and let's see if anybody's got some questions for me out there. All right.
As a reminder, if you have any questions, please submit it using the Q&A widget. The widget is located at the bottom of your console and to the right of your screen.
Great.
Cheryl?
Okay. Yep. All right. So I'm looking at a question here. To frame this a little bit. Can you tell us what the ratio, your database ratio to server is? Certainly. We're typically a five databases to one collector. And so that's kind of what our rule of thumb is at this point in time. Follow-on question here. What is the average number of databases of your clients? Well, that's kind of a tough question. I was just rolling through some of the numbers this morning, and we have some clients with 50 instances. I don't necessarily know how many that rolls back to servers. And then we have a lot of customers in that 1,000 to 2,000 range. And then we have those elite few that are up in the, driving towards that 5,000 plus range. All right. Oh, we're a little low on questions this morning, so I'm going to move on to the next slide. And invite you to attend our technical deep dive demo series. We have Imperva Securesphere database activity monitoring coming up on November 17th. We have Imperva Encapsula DDoS protection also on November 17th. And our Imperva SkyFence solution demo on December 1st. Our technical deep dive series is a monthly series where we try to do one deep dive on each of our major product lines. Please join us. If you can't join us in November, look for our series in December. And Jen, I think with that, I'm going to turn it back over to you. Oh,
Cheryl,
here's our
thank
poll
you very
results.
Much.
Okay. Wait, Jen, I'm going to take a quick look at this. This is the first time I'm getting to see the numbers on the poll results. I'm very thrilled, as a matter of fact, to see that everybody is looking, virtually everybody is looking to improve both compliance and security. And it looks like a majority of you are using native audit scripts and other tools. So I think today's seminar probably was spot on for you, and you got to see some of the differences between the solutions. And I hope we hear from you in the near future. Okay, Jen?
Thank you, Cheryl. And this concludes today's Imperva webinar. We want to thank you for taking time out of your schedule today to be with us. Again, to reiterate what Cheryl said, if you're interested in learning more about our solutions, we invite you to our technical deep dive demos offered every Tuesday. The 30-minute demo takes a look inside of the nuts and bolts of the Imperva products and capabilities, with an end with a Q&A section with a security expert. Thank you again for joining us today, and have a fantastic day.